Hello again, and welcome to Race and Ethnicity, Week 4. So again, in this class, we're looking at the experiences of minorities and how race structures our life. Some big concepts, again, how was race socially constructed? Again, race is not a permanent structure of our society. Racial categories, we came up with those, and it is us who determines the criteria for races. And then you can also say that race was socially constructed for economic purposes, and that we needed a very European group that was in power needed a way to divide society into upper class and lower class. And so they said, what do all Europeans have in common? Oh, light colored skin. Okay, so we'll make up races. We'll have white and non-white, and hence your original races. So a big argument for why race was socially constructed is so that we had an upper class and a lower class. And again, when you have an upper class and a lower class, you start getting in all these class issues like subjugation and less life chances, or your life chances are based upon where in the social class system you're located. So when you're looking at the experiences of race and ethnicity, and then you're looking at that in the United States from a perspective of non-whites, the idea of race is a way to keep people in the lower classes, to subjugate them, to make sure they can't improve their social class level, to make sure that they can't get higher, more elite social roles in the social class system. And so race historically made it so all non-whites could not compete, let's say, for better jobs, okay? And this also goes for women. Women were historically denied access from getting out of the lower classes for having power for themselves. Okay, so for week 4, you guys are going to look at prejudice and racism. And again, the difference between prejudice and discrimination is prejudice is attitudes and discrimination is actions. And oppression is just mechanisms by which we keep people from being able to rise up the social class ladder. Because again, we didn't necessarily live in a meritocracy in the United States. We live in a system of power, privilege, and oppression in which one group is trying to dominate another group. And that's pure conflict theory. You can't, again, from a functionalist perspective, say that race structures our life and structures society, but look how race structures our life. It meant that up until the 1960s, if you were African American, you really didn't have a shot at getting an elite job. If you're a woman, you couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer prior to 1960. Take that second wave of feminist movement to actually pull that off, okay? So you guys are going to be doing 2 assignments. Your first assignment is the color brave or color blind assignment. So you will watch this video and then you're going to write a reflection paper and answer all of these questions. And you can just number it on your sheet and maybe do a heading that says color brave or color blind. So that's your first assignment you're going to have to do. Then you're going to put that in the Dropbox. Then the second assignment you have to do is this implicit biases. So for this, you're going to watch this video, okay? Then you're going to open up Understanding Implicit Biases from Ohio State. Then you're going to complete the Race Implicit Association test, and you're going to check off skin tone, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and Muslim Americans, okay? Then you're going to write a reflection paper of 400 words, and this is the instructions for that. And you're going to drop it here in the implicit bias assignment. And again, this is a 2000 level class, so there's a little bit more writing involved, but writing is an excellent skill. And it took me a long time to really learn to write, and I wish I had done it earlier. So you guys, please take this chance to use headings and subheadings when possible and really learn and hone your craft of writing. Do a little creative writing. It's an awesome opportunity to do that. That's important in sociology. I also have degrees in psychology, but in psychology, I didn't write as much. I had to really become a sociologist before I learned to write. So this is a pretty good skill. And then on that note of writing, you have one more thing you have to do this week, which is going to be topic sign up. So you guys are going to open up this. You can choose your own topic, okay? But here's a bunch of options for you. And just depending on what you guys are interested in. I am personally really interested in the association between social class and race, okay? And then how stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination come out of that. Again, Europeans wanted to make sure no one else could compete with them, so they divided society into upper class, lower class, and your race determined what social class you were in. So again, segregation, this division of people into economic and social classes based upon arbitrary traits like race. Does that still happen in America? Historically, obviously, there's tons of examples. So you could just choose, you can do it in contemporary, you can do it in like historically, you could take segregation after Jim Crow. You could look at residential segregation in the 1940s. when the US decided to, the Congress got together, and we're like, these neighborhood segregation laws that you have to sign when you buy a house are, unconstitutional. So that's great. You can look at racism and discrimination in high schools, and you can look at how the education system filters people into upper class and lower class. And a lot of times, your race determines the neighborhood you live in historically, and not so much in modern times. But there's a lot to the association between racism, the education system, and filtering people into social classes. So, again, is the education system institutionally racist? Prior to 1950s, you could totally argue that. In modern times, it's a lot more subtle. You got to dig and you got to do some evidence. Some people are into looking at culture, so role of hip hop culture is fun. Police brutality against minorities. Usually when I write these papers, I choose like three main points. So even for police brutality, you could take like three prime examples, like the murder of Emmett Till in the 1950s that started the civil rights movement, or the beating of Rodney King in the 90s, which started the race riots, or of course everyone we have in modern times, because this was written before what just happened over the last 6 months. Okay, so that's a powerful one. Struggle of African Americans during Reconstruction's great. Jim Crow laws, literacy tests, ways to keep people from voting. I mean, a lot there. Mass incarceration of blacks, police targeting of specific races, despite the fact that white people are 2 times to 1 more likely to have a gun and drugs in their car than someone who's black or Latino, for example. That's some powerful statistics. Racism in the news, hate crimes toward Muslims in America. But what's even more interesting? Hate crimes against Muslims are only 14%. Hate crimes against Jewish people, that's 50% of religious discrimination. I mean, that's powerful numbers right there. 50% of hate crimes are against Jewish people. Why? That's important to discover, okay? Discriminations of Latin Americans in the workforce, all the stereotypes attached to Latin Americans. I mean, again, Latin Americans are the least likely to commit crimes. So why do we have stereotypes? Diversity in films, all white directors. There's a lot you could do with all different industries like the film and sports. Why is every GM of the NFL white? That's a good question, because was any black person allowed to acquire that many billions up until 1960, and now only in modern times can a black person acquire that kind of wealth? That's institutional discrimination. Okay, things you got to look at, guys. Reality is not always pretty, and society is not always gorgeous. You got school population. Look at white schools versus minority populated schools, and then how does that affect their socioeconomic status? How does that affect their culture? I mean, there's just so much to neighborhood, culture, school systems. I mean, segregation is all built in there, guys. Again, the white flight of the 1960s, only people that had a car and enough money to pay the high taxes could live out in the nice suburbs with the nice schools. But now the inner cities are becoming really nice and very affluent, and the suburbs are now full of drugs and crime, whereas the cities are getting nice. So what happened there? So there's some urbanization movements being there. So yeah, racism and race and urbanization studies is fascinating. There's a great association there. You got Black Lives Matter, you got racial profiling, you got segregation of African Americans in inner city housing. Again, this is not modern times. Now you're seeing this gentrification of the cities, but up until about the 2000s, 2010, the inner cities were primarily lower class people. Okay, and who was stuck in the lower classes? And so how does that affect the culture of entire groups of people? Big, big questions, okay? How African Americans, Asians, Latins are disadvantaged in the workforce, biracial issues. Biracial is a brand new study that we need to start looking into. Suicide rates, for example, higher for biracial people. So that is a big, big subject, because you get into identity theory when you start looking at biracial identity. What group do I belong to? And if you don't know which group you belong to, then you experience anomie. That's classic Durkheim, disconnection from society. Okay, African American schools, you got the destruction of Hispanic culture, which not just Hispanic culture. You're looking at assimilation versus accommodation. There's a whole study of that in the US. You can go real broad with that one. Now, the experience of Asian Americans, again, Chinese Exclusion Act of the 1880s and 1890s, when they re-verified it, it started out for 10 years, but this ends up being 50 years of discrimination against Asians, to the extent that we took away their citizenship, and Asian Americans are the only ones to ever have their citizenship revoked. That's powerful stuff, okay? So, guys, have fun this week. Let me know if you need anything, and it's an honor. Thank you so much.